Welcome to the Jerry Ratcliffe Show. I am Chris Graham, and we got a lot of news to get into, but I do want to get into one bit of news first. Jerry Ratcliffe, whose name is on this show, is among the newest class of Virginia Sports Hall of Fame members. At least he will be in the class of 2023. That news coming down this week. Jerry, congratulations on this honor.
Well, thank you, Chris. It means a lot coming from you. You've helped me a great deal, and I have immense gratitude to you and your wife. But thank you. It's a very humbling honor for sure, and something I didn't know if would happen or not. And it's just cool. It's cool going in with Zim and number 12, along with the other honorees, but those two in particular, since I've had such a long relationship with those two guys and personal friends. So very humble, and the response has been overwhelming. I have incredible gratitude to all of those people who have congratulated me and sent well wishes, and I appreciate all of them.
I was thinking when I saw, and of course, saw the news about your name being in the list, and then, wow, how cool is it to be in there with guys like Sean Moore and Ryan Zimmerman too? That's incredible. I mean, if it can be even more an honor, I'm sure that's part of it as well. So let's get to the news now. We were thinking when we scheduled to talk today, we try to talk every Thursday at 4:00 Eastern time. We were thinking, we'll talk about basketball. Virginia basketball has got a game with Florida State. They just won a game, big one at Michigan this week. Probably won't talk any football. And then, yes, there's news in football breaking in the last hour as we're getting ready to record. Brennan Armstrong headed to the transfer portal. We were both a little surprised that he still had the year of eligibility left. I had kind of presumed maybe he did, but now we confirm he has a year of eligibility left and apparently intends to spend it somewhere other than Charlottesville.
Yeah, and that part doesn't surprise me at all. We anyone that covered Virginia football this year and spent time in the locker rooms, or not locker room, but the interview rooms afterward, and other interviews during the week or whatever, easily could sense the frustration from Armstrong about just how the offense didn't work, just didn't click. The new passing system brought in by Tony Elliott and Des Kitchens just never clicked. It just, everybody knows the numbers, that how great they were in 2021 when Virginia and Armstrong led the nation for most of the season in passing, all sorts of categories, deep completed passes, big play passes, touchdowns, yardage, completion percentage, you name it. So many receivers that had incredible numbers, and were rated by Lindy's magazine in the preseason as one of the top 4 schools in terms of returning receivers in the country. Those other schools went on and had great years this year, but Virginia obviously did not. So the frustration was there week after week. And I wasn't aware. I thought that he might have another year because of the COVID, but I wasn't sure. But now that we're aware that he did have the extra year, it was no surprise that he wanted to get out of here and move on to somewhere where he can experience the kind of year, or at least something akin to the kind of year he had in 2021. And there's already been speculation he may end up at Syracuse with former coordinator Robert Anae and former quarterback coach Jason Beck. And why not? I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Syracuse had a graduate transfer quarterback in this past season. And I'm imagining they're in the market for an experienced quarterback, and who better than to get a guy that you've worked with and had success with?
Don't have to teach the system to. He knows the system as well as anybody can possibly know that system. Yeah, that's right. The only thing I thought that could keep him and some others maybe on the offense from thinking about entering the transfer portal was, I'm presuming here. I don't have any information, so I don't want to mislead anybody. But the way the offense struggled this year, Des Kitching seems like he might be on a short leash in terms of his job. If the season hadn't ended the way it did, and we all know the way it ended, my thought was after the Virginia Tech game that would have been played last weekend, Kitchings may have been on the unemployment line as early as Monday. And the promise of a new offensive coordinator could have maybe at least factored into a decision by a guy like Brennan, for example, the leader of the offense, to maybe whether or not he would go. I'm reading tea leaves here on this too, but maybe the fact that he's, here it is, a few days before the transfer portal formally opens up, he's already announcing his intent to enter the transfer portal. Maybe he's getting some indication that there isn't going to be a change, or he just doesn't want to stick around to see. I mean, that could be the other side of this too.
Well, that's true. And then, well, I don't think we know Tony Elliott well enough now to make an educated guess as to what he might do. Whether or not there had been a tragedy with the program, but we don't know that he would have made a change there. And even if there was, I don't think Tony Elliott is going to change his mind on his system and implementing his system, which obviously just didn't click. And maybe it will with a new quarterback and new offensive personnel, but it certainly didn't this past year. And I don't know how much they tried to adjust it throughout the season. He told us that he at times tried to simplify some things or of that nature, but whatever they did, it just never really panned out. And maybe they need to start all over again with new personnel, because if they're not going to make any changes to it, it doesn't matter what the coordinator is, if it's a new coordinator or not. If they're not going to change the system, I don't know if it's going to click with anybody. I don't know. It's a big question mark going forward as to whether Brennan had come back or not. Whether Jay Wolford or a transfer quarterback or whoever comes in, is it going to click with them either? New coordinator or no new coordinator? That's a really big question going forward into spring ball, Chris.
It really is. And, Brennan this time last year was putting his name in the NFL draft consideration. We don't know exactly what word he got back, but he decided to come back. I
don't think he got good news in that department, or I think he might have been gone, but I don't think the NFL people thought he was ready yet.
There's that. And, if even if he would have been told he's a late round pick, that's a risk. If you're told you're a 6th or 7th round pick, you could always be an undrafted free agent. And then you would regret giving up another year to maybe hone your skills and improve your draft stock. But that said, now it's wide open at quarterback for Virginia. Now, Jay Woolfolk he was the number 2 guy this year, and he's ostensibly going to stay around. Plus, he's got the baseball side of things. He wants to stay around for that. He's got a promising baseball career, and certainly will be a big part of Virginia baseball again in the spring. He was the setup man for the Hoos this past season, and presumably could move into a closer role, or who knows, maybe he'll compete for a weekend starting job. We'll just have to see that on the baseball side of things. But that complicates what he can do with football, because, of course, spring football, 15 practices in March and April, coincides with the heart of the ACC baseball season, the start in the middle of the ACC baseball season. And so, yeah, that makes it so with Armstrong now formally on his way out, likely Virginia is going to have to go to the transfer portal themselves to see if they can find, if nothing else, depth at quarterback, even just someone to compete with Woolfolk, maybe a couple guys to compete for that job as well.
Yeah, and if they do, I imagine they'll try to look for somebody that fits the kind of system that they're trying to use there. And I don't know how unique that system is to college football in terms of that system, and how hard it'll be to find somebody that is acclimated to that. I don't know if there's any body on the Clemson roster in quarterback situation that might be thinking about leaving there or not. That And again, they may not know this system either because they had a new coordinator this past year too. I don't know how much their system now is similar to the system they used under Tony Elliott, or whether it was just a Dabo system and it stayed the same. But yeah, it's wide open. Jay Woolfolk was said to be this past season the quarterback of the future, and I assume that he is. And obviously he has been in the system for a year, but we haven't seen much of him, so we don't know how well he adapted to it either. And like you said, he has a baseball career to think about too. So I'm assuming he'll come back to football, but I guess you never know until you see what happens this spring.
That's right. That's right. He's it interests me that there was talk late in the season as Virginia played it out for a couple of weeks at least. Tony Elliott talked about having a package of plays for Jay to get him on the field and maybe do some evaluation. We never got to see him in that action, as it turned out. They didn't use they put him in some plays. He was lined up at wide receiver or at running back, but he never got any plays at quarterback. And then, who knows what they would have done perhaps in the last two games, Coastal Carolina and Virginia Tech. We'll never know that now. They may have had some more action for him then. But yeah, he'll go in as an untested, at least from a game standpoint, untested entity in that respect. So, hey, for the listeners out there, JerryRatcliffe.com, AugustaFreePress.com, we'll be keeping up with whatever other developments there are on the transfer portal the next few days, next couple of weeks, certainly with that. And we can maybe presume there will be some more activity, certainly, in that realm. So Jerry, let's switch to basketball. The Virginia men's team first. The women's team is doing great. They're 9-0 as well. I mean, right now, Virginia, both the men and women are undefeated. The men, we'll start with them. They're 6-0. They're number 3 in the country, and an impressive come from behind win in their first true road test of the season Tuesday night at Michigan, down 11 at halftime. Clamped on the defense, kept the offense running, and got 5 guys in double figures, and Virginia pulls out the win. That was an impressive win just because of the nature of the way things were going. I mean, Michigan had 45 points in the first half, and Virginia really had to do some work there. What your thoughts on that game, Jerry?
I agree, Chris. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better road win anywhere in the country this season than coming back from 11 down at halftime at Michigan. It was a very hostile environment. Against a decent team. Michigan got I guess they're 5-2, and even though they had struggled, there's still some talent in that program, and they're hard to beat at home. But yeah, that was really impressive the way they made adjustments at halftime. Tony kind of sicked his guards onto the Michigan guards a little bit and shut down their 3-point shooting in the second half. They only made 1 3-pointer in the second half. I think that was probably the overall difference in the game after they made 7, I think, in the first half. But the mental adjustment that he had made, he challenged his team to be more physical because Michigan was just riding roughshod over those guys in the first half. And Virginia met the challenge. Caden Shedrick met it full force with his mouth, taking an elbow from the big Michigan big guy, Dickinson, and was called for the foul somehow. I still can't figure that one out. It looked like Shedrick got fouled twice on that play to me, and instead he was the one that was called with the foul and left the game with a bloody mouth from that elbow. But Virginia matched them physically in the second half, and I thought that was a huge difference as well. And I still, and I said this several years ago, and I've said it every year since then, and I'll continue to say it. I don't think there's a coach in the country in any sport, particularly in college basketball, that makes better halftime adjustments than Tony Bennett.
He's, it's funny. We're watching the game. It's 45-34 at halftime, and I'm thinking to myself, that's not going to persist. Tony's going to figure something out here. And we've seen it for years. I'm impressed, particularly. I mean, Hunter Dickinson, the 7'1" big for Michigan. One, he's an NBA talent. He reminds me of Davidas Sabonis, who's now playing out in Sacramento after some years in Indiana with Malcolm Brogdon. Lefty who's got a mid-range game, can score at the basket. He's very deliberate. Very patient, very high efficiency kind of guy. Good passer. Got all the skills. From Northern Virginia, as it turns out. I looked at his recruiting profile, and Virginia was way down on his list to a point where he didn't even visit Virginia. In the second half, Cafaro had 4 fouls in 4 minutes, so he wasn't available as an option, and he wasn't effective even around those 4 fouls in 4 minutes. Caden Shedrick eventually fouls out, as you mentioned. He fouled out on that play where he got elbowed in the mouth. There were long stretches where Ben Vanderplas, 6'8", perimeter shooter primarily for this team, had to guard Dickinson one-on-one. Now, he got some help with some post-to-post doubles from Jaden Gardner, a 6'6" guy. But Dickinson had 14 in the first half on 7 of 10 shooting. He had 7 in the second half on 2 of 7 shooting. They did a great job with a smaller lineup neutralizing their big. In addition to the guards, I mean, Jet Howard could play for anybody in the country as well, the son of Juwan Howard, who's a freshman, 6'8" guard for them. But, boy, the job that Vanderplas did on Dickinson, I think, was noteworthy.
Yeah, and sometimes you can get by with that, using smaller, quicker guys to double and harass a guy and try to take the ball away from him, front him and back him, and try to not deny the entry pass, or if once he gets the entry pass, double him and not limit his movements. Even though he's really good for his size, it's hard for him to, I think, I think it restricts his movement a little bit when there's 2 guys on him, no matter what size they are. So, and reaching for the ball, trying to keep him from doing any damage. But that guy's good. I mean, he's really good. He's definitely going to be playing in the NBA. He and the big guy from Purdue right now appear to be the 2 best centers in the country that I've seen this season. But Vanderplas should be applauded. Gardner as well, and Vanderplas was another. And I said before the season, Chris, you and I talked about it. I think getting Vanderplas coming into the program as a transfer, I think it's better than signing a 5-star recruit out of high school, because this guy's been there. He understands college basketball. He's talented. He can play inside and outside, and he gave him a really nice offensive dimension when they needed it really bad there late in the second half. He had a 7-point spurt that was one of the keys to the game, keeping Virginia in it. And he just gave him another option when some of the other guys were being kind of quieted a little bit. He might have been the MVP of the game. I'm not sure, but he certainly was worthy of it. Just an outstanding performance.
Yeah, he can play 3, 4, or 5. The versatility will be really important for this team going as the year goes on. We got to talk about Reese Beekman too. I'm just realizing that because of the schedule we normally do on Thursdays, we didn't talk last Thursday. And so as a result, we didn't talk about the Vegas experience for Virginia. What happened in Vegas didn't stay in Vegas. They won the 2 games out there, beating Baylor and Illinois. And Reese Beekman is emerging. I mean, we've been waiting for this for a couple of years. This is his 3rd season at Virginia. And man, he's really grown finally. I mean, he's hitting threes consistently within the flow of the offense. He's got confidence to take those shots, and he's making those shots. But him getting into the lane and getting to the rim and finishing shots off, he did it great in I think it was the Illinois game down the stretch. In that one, he was the offense in the first half for Virginia on Tuesday night against Michigan. And then comes back from the injury and has a big steal down the stretch that really he made the free throw on the intentional foul. Then after the ball's inbounded, Kie Clark makes 2 free throws. That play solidified the game for Virginia late. Reese Beekman is playing like the NBA talent that I think we've thought he would be for ever since he walked on grounds.
Yeah, that was definitely the play of the game when he stole that ball and went coast to coast with it, but getting intentionally fouled. and was MVP of the tournament. And it's got a nice championship belt, heavyweight championship belt, like Mike Tyson, that he can hang up on his mantle somewhere. I'm sure his mama's probably got that displayed somewhere prominently in their home if she's got it by now. But yeah, I mean, he has emerged, and I think the national media is starting to catch on to how great this guy is. Virginia fans have known for all along, and just waiting for him to pop out, and he certainly has. And I mean, he scored 18 the other night in the Michigan game to lead Virginia, and had 5 assists, and that was and that was with a bad ankle that limited his movements most of the second half, or at least part of the second half. And we saw Ethan Saliba, Virginia's veteran trainer, work his magic yet again. Anybody who's got a bad ankle, he can tape it up to where they can function pretty well, as well as anybody could imagine on a rolled ankle. And so he deserves some credit too. As always, Ethan is a magic man. But yeah, Beekman, we haven't seen the best of him yet. He's just getting better and better and better.
Yeah, Ethan. I was thinking back when Beekman got hurt and we saw him take his shoe off, and Ethan's taping his ankle up. I'm thinking back to the Purdue game in the Elite Eight when Kyle Guy rolled his ankle. And Kyle was struggling in the NCAA tournament at that point. And after he got the ankle taped up, he couldn't miss in the second half of that game against Purdue, second half and overtime of that game against Purdue. So, yeah, it's almost like, hey, if you get hurt, that's okay. He's going to fix you up and get you back out there. Jerry, you've been watching Virginia basketball for 40 plus years. What are your thoughts on this team? I mean, I think going into the season, I thought that this team was going to be a really good team. It's certainly a top 3 team. I thought they, might certainly edge out either one of the two, Duke and Carolina. To this point in the season, Virginia's outplayed everybody in the ACC, and they're number 3 in the country for a reason. I thought this Virginia team might suffer a couple of losses early on because of the fact that you got some new guys working in, you're playing a tough schedule. This Michigan game has me thinking that the ceiling might be even a little higher than I thought going in. I want to get you have the longer view than I have. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, that kind of schedule, and all 3 of those games were away from Charlottesville. And even though this team is experienced and old in the sense that they've got some graduate or 5th-year guys, it's still, all of them didn't play together last year with Vanderplas and then the 2 freshmen. And these other guys didn't have a lot of success on the road last year, so they were a little bit untested in that area of the game. And so it was reasonable to think that there was no way they were going to go 3-0 against Michigan on the road, Illinois, and Baylor in a neutral environment, if you want to call it that. But it was still away from home. And I mean, they came out of that unscathed and had 2 incredible second half comebacks. I mean, look at what they did against Baylor, and starting with a 20-5 run coming out of the dressing room at halftime to dominate that game until Baylor's athleticism got them back in the game late. But I didn't think they'd go 0-3. I thought they would win 1 or 2 of those games. I didn't think they'd win them all. And I think they've got an excellent chance to beat Houston in Charlottesville in a couple of weeks. The one thing about that game that worries me, Chris, is it's their first game coming out of the exam break. And we've seen in the past that without a game during that long stretch of time, that sometimes Virginia doesn't show up in the best form. You can tell that there's some rust. Even though they're practicing, they're still not playing against another team. But I think that's the one thing that in the back of my mind, it makes me wonder if they can handle the number one team in the nation in a setting like that. But I think, those 3 games to me, Chris, prove that they can play with anybody in the country. And they're Final Four worthy if they can continue to play this way throughout the ACC schedule, which there's no reason that they shouldn't just keep getting better and better. And we've seen that Carolina obviously has some weaknesses that we didn't anticipate with almost their entire roster coming back off a national runner-up team. I thought they might have an edge on Duke because even as talented as Duke is, those guys, for the most part, are still freshmen. They have a transfer and they have a guy back from last year's team that was one of the key players. But for the most part, they're rookies, and it takes a while for those guys to figure it out. But right now, Virginia, like you said, is playing as good or better than anybody in the ACC. And even though some of the conferences has shown to be kind of on the weak side at the bottom of the roster, so to speak, but there's some other good teams. I mean, Miami's good. Notre Dame showed last night they can play some good basketball. So it's not going to be a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination, but wow, I mean, these guys have impressed me. I know some people didn't think that they would be this good this early, but I thought they had a chance, but I didn't think they'd be undefeated right now.
Yeah, I was thinking it was more like the 2013, 2014 team that might suffer a couple losses early, but kind of like that team did. By the time they got to January, they were ready, and that team won the ACC regular season, won the tournament, got a number 1 seed in the tournament, got to the Sweet 16. A lot of people still, I'm one of them, thinks Tevin Jones got fouled, and maybe we win that game too. But that's been a while, and I'm still holding a grudge. But that this year's team might play like that team. It's early, I know, but this team's reminding me more of the 2017, 2018, and 2018, 2019 teams that had tough early season schedules and did well against them, and then also played well in January and February. So there's a lot of ACC ball to play. So some key non-conference games. You mentioned the Houston game has had my attention, just like you, Jerry. The compressed ACC schedule with adding the 2 games to the schedule, making it a 20-game schedule, mandates we have to play a game 2 games before Christmas, and we have to play after the exam break. I think that there's a road game that we play, and so we couldn't schedule the normal comeback game that we would love to have before playing someone like Houston. We would normally like to play a RPI 200 plus coming back, because even those games in past years have not been the greatest looking games for Virginia teams coming back from that break. Right. You're coming back with the number 1 team in the country, so it's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I'm hoping Houston stays number 1.
Yeah,
coming into that game, they haven't been number 1 since 1983, and that brings back some great memories for me because that was the year that I believe that was the season when Virginia played Houston in Japan, and with Clyde Drexler and Larry Michaud and Hakeem Olajuwon and some other really good players, and Virginia beat them without Ralph in Japan. It was after the game of the century against Patrick Ewing and Georgetown in the Cap Center, and I flew the next morning straight to Japan, to Tokyo, for that tournament, and we didn't know when we got there that Ralph was going to be sick. He had the flu and didn't play in that event. And I was the only American reporter over there in Tokyo for that 3-team tournament brought to us by, sponsored by Suntory, I think it was, Japanese drink company, I believe. And so the Houston Chronicle contacted me to cover the Cougars for them, and I was also covering it for Sports Illustrated as a correspondent for their holiday wrap-up. So I was quite busy in the hotel with a time difference trying to cover it for an AM paper, a PM paper, and Sports Illustrated. So I kept myself running back and forth in a taxi cab from my hotel to the United Press International building downtown Tokyo to have my stories telexed all hours of the day and night, trying to keep up with it. But one of the fun parts for me was not only covering Virginia, but covering Houston's practices and riding with Guy Lewis in their little bus from the hotel to the gym for practice, and having breakfast with Clyde Drexler and a couple other guys, and riding in the bus with the team to the game. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, riding through downtown Tokyo and some of the Houston players talking about, man, it's hard to imagine that this city is beautiful and brilliant as it is, with all the neon lights and stuff, and vibrant as it was then in 1983, was once burned to the ground. And Olajuwon from Africa obviously had no knowledge of this, and he asked his teammates, he said, why was it burned to the ground? And they said it was because of World War II. And he said, what was World War II? He had no idea at the time what World War II was. So it was a cool experience for me, just getting to know those guys a little bit and covering them, and covering that entire event. So it'll be Phi Slamma Jamma revisited when they come to Charlottesville in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, let's get Texas knocked out of the way at number 2 and have that be a 1 versus 2.
That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be something? I mean, and then the 1 versus 2, the 83 aspect for Houston. It'll bring back hey, you have to go through your archives and revisit some of those stories from the 83 trip, just to bring that back to light. That'd be kind of fun for you to do. It sounds like you've already got a lot to tell.
Yeah, there was a million stories coming out of that week in Tokyo, and some of it, some pretty funny stuff. But yeah, you're right. I'll have to dig that up. And one of the cool things I'll remember as well is that I got to know a Japanese sports writer while I was there, and he was covering the event, and he tipped me off that one morning in the hotel they were bringing in a guy from the Japanese Olympic team to meet Ralph. The guy wanted to meet Ralph, and this guy was a freak of nature. I mean, he was a giant. He looked bigger than Andre the Giant. I've never seen Ralph Sampson look so stunned at seeing another human being that made Ralph look small. This guy was like 7'5" or 7'6", and he must have weighed 350 pounds. I mean, he was the biggest human being I have ever seen in my life. And I mean, Ralph's jaw dropped, I think, when he met this guy. The guy wasn't very fast. He couldn't get up and down the floor very fast like Ralph, but my goodness, what a huge, intimidating person he was. I think I have a picture of that somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. But
yeah,
there was a lot of cool stories coming out of there.
I think this is where the podcast needed to go anyway. We talked about earlier being named to the Hall of Fame. For those out there listening who, they know generally Jerry Ratcliffe's been around for 40 plus years. Talk to us about your career. I just learned, for example, I mean, because I learned recently you dropped in that when you first started your career, you were not just a sports writer, you did sports and news at the beginning of your career. Talk some about just your experiences in that respect.
Yeah, I can't say that it was a lot of fun because I didn't want to be a news reporter.
You knew you wanted to be a sports writer when you came out of college?
Yes. I was still in college.
Oh, you were still in college. Okay.
Working part-time, but yeah, and until a full-time sports job opened up, and I was at a very small newspaper. The entire newsroom was in one big, not even that big a room, really. but yeah, I had to do everything from covering the Women's Garden Club meeting in that small town, Pulaski, Virginia, which is in Southwest Virginia, not far from Virginia Tech, for those who don't know. I covered a murder trial, a very grisly murder. Some people went into a one of these mom and pop motels and murdered the elderly lady in a vicious murder. Beat her husband to near death. He probably should have died. He survived and identified the suspects. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to cover a murder trial, having no experience doing that. Thank God I had an experienced editor who had worked at the Miami Herald before and knew his stuff, and taught me a lot of stuff along the way. But that would turn into a mistrial. They had to cover. They had to have another trial. Thank God I didn't have to cover that. But I covered all kinds of stuff. I had to cover an airplane crash in the mountains in the wintertime. Me and a photographer made our way up the mountain and got there before the state police did. The only person there was the forest ranger. And I still to this day don't know why, but me and the photographer and the forest ranger were assigned by the state police to carry the body of the pilot down the mountain. No path. It was like a mile and a half or 2 miles through brush, no trail or anything, on a makeshift stretcher. And that was a rather harrowing experience for me. I had never really been around a dead person up until that point, and not much fun. Very, very disconcerting. Some frivolous stuff I had to. There was a lake down there called Claytor Lake, and these yahoos came into the newspaper and claimed that there was a monster that lived under Claytor Lake in caves, and I was assigned to go with these guys and do a story on it. And so I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was found myself crawling on my belly through mud in a couple of very tight passes under the lake in caves where there was not much room between the top of my back and the bottom of my stomach to slither through some passageways that made me feel very uncomfortable, that I didn't know if I was going to get stuck or get out of there or not. So a lot of junk like that, Chris.
Did you find the monster, by the way?
We saw something that was supposed to be monster tracks, but I have a feeling that they had been man-made and placed there well ahead of time by these guys.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's how those stories usually work out. Yeah.
But it did have it was a very well-read story. And I had to do a lot of other goofy stuff like the astrological forecast. So I asked for forgiveness for people back in those days if I took some liberties and said, if you're a Sagittarius, don't go anywhere near electrical appliances today, or stay away from the water this month, or various things like that.
Wait, you actually had to write? You had to come up with those?
No, I just changed them.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah, that's interesting.
My own amusement, because I was bored.
I mean, when I started in newspapers in 1995, I was the opposite. The sports job was part-time. I wanted a full-time news job. And I did sports for 6 months waiting for the news job to open up. But then I had to do a lot of the same silly things when hunting season, which is now this time of year, whenever when some yahoo would come in after shooting a deer, the sports editor said, I remember the first time I did this, the first of many times, go out there and take a picture and do a story.
I did that too.
But yeah, I mean, and I've told people, I've told young journalism students that, like when I go speak at college journalism classes, they look at me like I got something hanging in my mouth. I mean, it's just like, really, you had to write a story about some guy who shot a deer? Oh yeah, I mean, you had to get the information.
Yep.
Typing the obituaries, typing the bowling scores.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
and again, the kids are like, really, you had to do? Yeah, that's what you had to do. Yeah, whatever they told you to do, you did, and you were happy to do it, and to be able to do the fun stuff. So when did you? So for the listeners out there again, when did you get to Charlottesville? When did you get to the Daily Progress and start covering UVA sports?
Yeah, I had a 4-year experience in Danville, Virginia. Before that, I was sports editor of the morning paper and the weekend papers, which was a combined circulation. And that's really where I found myself. Before, I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't think. I just tried to feel my way through it. But I covered Virginia Tech and Wake Forest and a lot of high school sports at the first paper. I was over 3 sports departments at that time, 3 small sports departments in Pulaski, Radford, and Blacksburg. And then in Danville, it was really cool because I covered not only Tech and UVA, but Wake Forest, NC State, Duke, and Carolina. So I was covering 6 schools and getting to know a lot of the other writers in the ACC, all the ACC personnel, a lot of the coaches at all those schools, and experimenting with newspapers, not just writing, but design and stuff, and did some a lot of experimenting and a lot of stuff that was far out and helped me develop as not only a journalist but as a page designer and stuff like that. And so when I got to Charlottesville, I was pretty well schooled in a lot of areas in newspapers, and there's nothing like experience to on the job experience, as you well know. And I think anybody that's come up through the business will tell you the same thing. You learn stuff there you don't learn in school. So I got to Charlottesville in 1982. My first game was covering Virginia and North Carolina, and they were number 1 and number 2 in the nation. Ralph Sampson and all the great Carolina players. And I got here essentially the same time as George Welsh. In fact, from Danville, I covered George Welsh's press conference when he was introduced as their new head coach, and it was still maybe the most memorable coaching press conference I've ever been to, because I'll never forget one of my heroes, Bill Millsaps of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, who still I regard as the greatest sports writer in this state's history. Looked up and asked George. He said, "George, Virginia's been known as a coach's graveyard. Why would you come here?" And without thinking, George said, "Well, if it's a graveyard, it's a very lovely graveyard." And George talked about how he didn't see any reason that Virginia couldn't be a top 25 program, and by God, he made it one, and did something that anybody who knew the status of Virginia football at that time to this day still can't believe the transition he made. One of the greatest coaching jobs in the history of any sport, I think. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to leave here over the years and go to much bigger papers all over the country. And I'm just one of these guys. I like staying put. I like to hear I could do pretty much anything I wanted to for years at the newspaper, before the newspaper industry started going down the tubes. I went to Final Fours. I went to bowl games. I covered the NFL. I went to Super Bowls. Covered the U.S. Open, Masters. A lot of really cool stuff over that span of my career. And so, I felt like I had an ideal job. I had good relationships with the majority of the coaches at UVA through the years. And I was pretty happy camper, so I stayed, and I don't regret it.
For those listening, who don't know Jerry personally, this for Jerry is like me being a dentist pulling his teeth right now without Novocaine. He hates talking about himself.
That's true. I do.
He absolutely does. He for 40 some years, you've been asking people questions and getting them to talk about themselves. And I'm always saying and emailing and saying, Jerry, talk more about stuff, whatever. And so, so I'll share an experience. This is, I've had the fortune to work with you, Jerry, the last four plus years. I'll at the Orange Bowl in late 2019. And so Jerry again, and this is not a front. Jerry is the most humble guy that you'll ever meet. My wife Crystal says Jerry is such a gentleman. We were talking about you just this morning in the context of the Hall of Fame. Jerry, there aren't many people like Jerry in terms of the just how proper he is and how respectful he is of everyone. And so Scott German and I are there covering the Orange Bowl for Augusta Free Press, and Jerry's there, of course, for JerryRatcliffe.com. And the game starts at 8:30, whatever time it is. You get off the bus, the media bus takes you there. It's like 4:30, 5 o'clock, something like that. And Scott's just eager to get on the field. There's nobody there. There's not even a guy there's not even a single guy warming up. It's just we want to walk on the field and see what it's like. So we eventually convinced Jerry to join us. and Jerry's like, oh, yeah, I'll walk on the field with you. And then, players start trickling out for pregame warmups, and then the alums start trickling out. And I'm not overstating this. It's like we were walking. Scott and I were the bodyguards of the Pope, because everybody wanted to see Jerry, and we're just there. I mean, Scott and I are just so Scott's job was to take pictures, and Jerry kept pulling me into pictures with the likes of everybody, who's who in UVA sports past, because Jerry didn't want to be in a picture by himself. And I've got a sheepish look on my face because I don't deserve to be here. I don't know Chris Long. I don't know Tiki Barber, and they're putting their arm around me like they're my best friend. No, they're doing that because Jerry told them to. And Jerry, I don't know how you do it, man. I mean, you're just everybody, but it's not like it's a big deal to you. It's just like Chris Long and Tiki and Thomas Jones, who we've had on the podcast, and just loves you. Thomas Jones would do anything for you. You've got these great relationships with these people, and it just astounds me that all these years later they still revere you the way they do.
Well, I think it's just because I treat them like they're just people like the rest of us, and I think that's the way they really want to be treated. And they're at the height of their professions and celebrities and all that stuff. But down deep, there, it's Tiki Barber and Ronnie Barber from Roanoke Cave Spring High School, and Thomas Jones from Powell Valley, and he'll tell you about playing football on the side of a mountain on Friday night. And all these other guys. I mean, and Chris Long, he's a kid who probably didn't think he'd ever be where he is today when he was at St. Anne's as a sophomore in high school. They're just good people. They're just good guys, and they're just regular guys. And I'm fortunate to have covered them and gotten to know them. And the one thing that I regret about how the sports business has, I don't know if evolved is the right word, but as what it is now compared to what it was growing up, is we got a chance to know these guys in school when they were college athletes or high school athletes, particularly college athletes. We got to hang out with those guys, and Anthony Poindexter and James Ferrier and Sean Moore and Herman Moore and on and on and on. Ralph Sampson, all the basketball stars, Malcolm Brogdon, Joe Harris, those guys. Not as much in recent years, but up until recent years, we got to know these guys because we had a lot of accessibility. I've become friends with a lot of these guys over the years. Terry Kirby, Chris Slade, some of the basketball guys, on and on. Ryan Zimmerman. You can't do that now because you get limited access. These guys, they don't really get to know you as media. Sometimes I think because they don't know us like the old guys got to know us, they don't know whether they can trust us or not. They don't know what we're all about.
Well, for the most part, they just sit them up there on the media relations people sit them up on a podium, and we don't get the one-on-one like even just a few years ago we used to get.
Yeah, I mean, we used to sit around with these guys at a table and talk, and sometimes it would lead to more than just about that game or about the season they're having. It would be about their family and what they like to do in their spare time, and they got to know you a little bit, and that relationship would blossom over there. I wouldn't have all these friends that you mentioned and more if it hadn't been different. If it was like it is now, I wouldn't know these guys like this, and that we wouldn't have the respect for one another that we do, and we wouldn't have I mean, I've had great friendships with some of these guys, and that goes for coaches too. A lot of these coaches from the past are good friends to this day, even though a lot of them aren't even here anymore, aren't even coaching anymore. But it's a shame that the world we live in now isn't more like that, because again, there's a lot of really cool relationships that I think could be fostered if we did have that kind of access. And I think it's a shame that it's not that way anymore.
It feels more adversarial now, and it never was like that. I agree.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be, because we're not out to get these guys. And
Yeah.
I know some media have a bad reputation with athletes, but the majority of media don't. Most of the majority of the media at schools all around the country and are, they're just doing their job, and there's really usually not much to criticize or take shots at people. So it's something missing from today's sports world that's a shame, because again, they don't know if they can trust us because they don't know us.
That's right.
And we won't have these relationships down the road that we've had in the past, because we really don't ever get much of an opportunity to know each other.
So I got to ask, how did you hear about the Hall of Fame and pending induction? When did you get word? How did you get word? And what was your reaction when you got the word?
Well, actually, it was the best professional phone call I've ever gotten in my life. It was from Will Driscoll, the new executive director of the Hall of Fame. He's been there for a few years now. Incredible guy, who I think is going to do great things with the State Sports Hall of Fame. We'll have him on a podcast sometime soon. I think you'll like him. He's a really good guy. He actually called me November 7th, the morning of November 7th, Chris, and he told me to keep my mouth shut until they released it this past Monday morning. So it was hard to do, and because it was so exciting. But I was speechless, and if you know me, it's hard for me to be speechless. But it was, you hear people say, "Are you pulling my leg? Are you kidding me? Or you just messing with me or something?" And I was blown away. I was totally blown away. Incredibly humbled, and I just wish my mom had been around to see it. And it's just cool for my family and my friends and those who have known me for so long. And again, the response has been overwhelming, and I appreciate everybody that has reached out. I've tried to answer everybody's note, and I think I have. I don't know about the ones on Facebook, because I don't get on Facebook, but the others I have by email or text or Twitter. So, but I was just blown away, Chris, totally blown away.
What are the details? When is the induction?
It's April 21st and 22nd, I believe, in Virginia Beach. The Hall of Fame doesn't have its home anymore. It lost it a few years ago. They had a home in Portsmouth for years, a really cool building that they had incredible displays in. I think they have something now in a facility in Norfolk down near the waterfront. I don't know the specifics of that, but I think the ceremony is in Virginia Beach, and there's a hotel, and we'll put up some information about that, because I know some people have asked if they could attend, and yes, there is it's a 2-day thing. I think they have a breakfast of champions the day before, and some sort of a cocktail party or reception or something like that. And then the ceremony is the next day. But we'll put up information for that. One of my good friends used to be sports editor in Lynchburg, Jeff Motley, really close to me, is the PR director of Las Vegas Speedway. And he told me the other day he's going to be there, and that blew me away that he would think that much of me to come all the way across the country to this. So, but a lot of people have asked about it. We'll put that up for anybody who's interested in attending, because it'll be a cool day, not to see me, but to see Ryan Zimmerman and Sean Moore. They were two much more celebrated people than I am, and it'll be here cool listening to their stories. I think they're 7-minute speeches, and not long enough for those two to tell about their career. It's more than enough for me. I could have done mine in 3 minutes probably. But some other really neat people too. There's a track gal from Louisa who I think won 32 national championships or some incredible number like that. I'm looking forward to meeting her, and Jimmy Laycock, the great William and Mary football coach for so long. He's a cool guy, and he could probably tell stories for 3 hours and you wouldn't get tired of listening to those. And just some other neat people. I think D'Angelo Hall from Virginia Tech, and some other people that are very worthy of being in there. And so I'm honored to be in their company.
I want to be there for that weekend for the speeches, but I also just want to hang around the bar before and after the speeches. That's where you'll hear the real stories.
Yeah, those are the ones the good stories that you can't tell in public.
That's where you want to be, right? So yeah, I look forward to that information coming out. That's something to look forward to. And again, congratulations! What an awesome honor. And thank you for letting me interview you here too, especially because I didn't warn you I was going to interview you. I wanted to spring it on you, so that, because I knew if I warned you, you'd say, no, let's just talk about football and basketball. And so no, I got you. And no, this is a great listen for all those people out there. I mean, those who've known you for all these years, but those who have known you and maybe didn't know all these details. We could talk for hours and get stories. And usually those rare trips when we're all going together somewhere, I'm fortunate. Usually it's just Scott German is driving. He'll ask you questions and I'm just sitting there listening. And it's entertaining. I learn something new every time. So, look forward to more of those as well. Well, Jerry, as we're wrapping up here, you want to thank the sponsors as we're heading out?
Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't be able to do this without them. We appreciate them and the people that sponsor the website. But because we're podcast only today, I'll thank those people. The Good Feet people, the Good Foot Store, and Stone. Gosh.
Why? And I'm blanking on it too there, Jerry. And I go shopping there. I just went there. Oh gosh.
Stonefield.
For
some reason I was thinking Stonehenge, and I know that's not right, but
I kept sticking on Stonehenge too, and I know that's not right either. A collective brain issue there. Yeah.
Stonefield beside the Burger Block and across from the theater. Good Feet people are awesome people. Mr. Cotton, he's got some stories of his own. He can tell. We'll have to get him to tell some of those on here on a podcast sometime. But anyway, those people, I can personally testify to how they can help you with the foot arches and stuff that help your feet, help your ankles, help your joints, all through your body. And you owe it to yourself to go see them if you're having any difficulty or experiencing any discomfort in walking, running, etc. In fact, that's how he ended up buying the business. He was a runner, and I guess he still is, and was having some discomfort. Went in there, didn't know they existed. They fixed him up immediately, and he was so impressed he bought the company. So that tells you how good it is. And also Aberdeen Barn. We don't have to. They speak for themselves. If you've ever been to Aberdeen Barn, you know how good it is. Best steakhouse in Virginia, and gosh, go by. The atmosphere is awesome. The food is awesome. The service is awesome. And you owe it to yourself to drop by there and get a meal sometime over this great holiday season. Also, UVA Orthopedics, the great doctors over there work on your wahoos, and but mainly work on everybody in our community and beyond. Some of the best surgeons in the business. They've operated on a lot of college and pro athletes and fixed them up. Some names that are household names in the United States. So if you're having any kind of problems, go see them at their new facility out on Ivy Road. Incredible place. And also Ragged Mountain Running Shop for all your needs. We need to do another running podcast here soon and get Mark Lorenzoni back on the air and update us on the running news of Charlottesville. So thanks to all those guys. They make all this possible, and we appreciate their support.
Well, thanks to Jerry Ratcliffe, and thanks to you for listening. And if you want more information on UVA sports, go to jerryratcliffe.com. There's also information on AugustaFreePress.com, I should say. And you get the latest on UVA sports. Well, thanks for listening today. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a great day.